Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and today I took up another challenge. Last week I used the MAV to slay my enemies by getting road kills. That was highly entertaining, but this time a bunch of you wanted me to use the MG36 with the Suppressor, Foregrip, and 7x optic scope and see if I can do well with it. And in all honesty, the MG36 isn't the worst light machine gun in the game. It used to be a lot worse than it is now, but DICE buffed it. Actually, this weapon has gone through a bunch of stages where when it was first released, I want to say during the Back to Karkin expansion pack, it was really good. It was like one of the best light machine guns in the game, but then DICE kicked it in the kneecap, and then they realized that they went a little bit too far, and I think they buffed it a little bit more after that, a couple months later, but it's still not one of the best guns in the games by any means. I'd say it's got a nice little balance there, but the combination of attachments that you have recommended made this very painful. And probably the worst aspect of it is that initially it has a very slow bullet travel speed. It's going to travel at 550 meters per second, and while that's not the slowest by any means, it's still significant enough where it makes things a little challenging. And if you're not really sure why bullet velocity really matters, essentially it just makes it easier to take people out at range. The faster the bullet reaches its destination, the less you're having to compensate for bullet drop, the less you're having to lead the target if they're moving. It just makes it easier to drop someone at medium to long range, and the slower it is, the harder it becomes. And when you slap on the suppressor for the MG36, if Simtech.com is correct, it goes down to 310 meters per second, which is just ridiculously slow. It felt like I was throwing rocks at someone at long range. Like, if they were moving, there was like literally no chance of me lining up a shot. Maybe if they already had some damage done to them, but I would have to get lucky at that point. Like, it was so terrible that if I saw a target moving at range, it was like, I'm not even gonna attempt this. Like, there is literally no way that I'm gonna be able to drop them, simply because it was so challenging to compensate for the bullet drop and to lead the target. Like, it was just not gonna happen. Now, another challenging aspect of this is its recoil, and while it's not abysmal by any means, it's still a light machine gun, and so it's gonna have a fair amount of kick, and it's got a fair amount of vertical recoil. And when you're using the 7x scope, when you're aiming down sight, it feels like it's bouncing all over the place. And normally when you're just using, like, let's say the Cobra sight, or you're using one of these lower optic scopes, it's not really a problem. It's a lot easier to manage. But when you're going for someone up close, or even really at any distance, it just feels like a bucking bronco. And in all honesty, if you are using a high optic scope like the 7x and you're not using the bipod, you're probably doing something wrong. Or if you're able to make it work, like, you impress me. Like, this was probably the hardest aspect of it, simply just trying to stay on target while this thing is bouncing all over the place. The one redeeming quality, though, I would say of this weapon is that it does have a fairly nice initial recoil. It's not the best out of the light machine guns, but compared to a lot of the assault rifles in the game, it's pretty fantastic. And so if I did see someone at range and they weren't moving, that's kind of the key. As long as they weren't moving, I was able to tap fire them down, and that recoil became a lot more manageable. But it didn't necessarily make it a cakewalk by any means, because I was still needing to compensate for that extremely slow bullet velocity, and if they started to move or someone started to flank me. I mean, it's not a good weapon in general with this combination of attachments, but that was one nice aspect of it that I tried to kind of exploit as much as possible so that I could get those kills at range. Now, when I initially tried to complete this challenge, I wasn't exactly sure how to go about it, and my first instinct was to avoid aiming down sight. I knew that was going to be an absolute nightmare, and so I tried to use this as a hip-fire machine. And while in panic scenarios that worked, because this is a light machine gun, it's got an atrocious hip-fire accuracy, and also because I was using the suppressor, there's more weight at the end of the barrel. DICE equates that to a larger cone of fire. That made it even harder to take people out. And so panic scenarios, that was great, but it wasn't going to allow me to go on any kill streaks by any means. And so I realized that I just need to take advantage of the suppressor and try to flank my enemies as often as possible. And so throughout today's video, you'll notice that I am catching a lot of people by surprise, and that was almost the only way that I could go about this, because if I got into a firefight with someone if I didn't get the first couple of shots off, or if they initiated the fight, there was no way that I was going to win that firefight. Not only because of the recoil, the bullet velocity, but also because when I'm getting shot at, it's causing me to recoil even more. And so my my scope was bouncing all over the place in those engagements. And sometimes I was able to come out on top, and I was like, how in the world did that happen? That was all luck. So I really did need to flank my enemies. But even when I did get the flank off, I had to take and approach things very cautiously. I needed to make sure that the target died. I know how silly that kind of sounds, but when I'm using like a weapon that I'm very comfortable with, a setup that I'm very comfortable with, I can move from target to target very quickly, especially when I get the flank off. I'm like, all right, this takes this many bullets to drop them. I can quickly switch on over to the next target, and it's this really nice fluid motion. You feel like an absolute badass, but because of course I wasn't very comfortable with this, and because the recoil is all over the place, I needed to make sure that the target died before I switched on over to the next one, because if I didn't and I let them live for just a couple of seconds, that was plenty of time for them to get behind you know, a barrier or something like that, or just to turn around and take me out as I'm like, oh my god, I didn't kill them, and trying to find them with this crazy scope, and then eventually I would die. So I just had to take things cautiously. I had to make sure that I would drop my target before I moved on to the next one, and as long as I did that, and as long as I got these flanks off, I was fairly successful with it. But not only that, when I did get the flank off, I always went for the target that was in the back. I never try to kill someone that was in front of someone, because even though the suppressor kept me off the minimap and everyone is staring at the thing the entire time, if I kill someone that is in front of someone else, they're gonna realize that their ally just died, look around for what killed them. They probably saw the bullets coming from the left. They're gonna turn to the left, they're gonna realize I'm there, and then take me out. So I always made sure that when I got the flank off, I picked and chose my targets appropriately and always went for the guy that was in the back, so that everyone around him didn't know I was kind of picking people off one by one. But that is about it for today's terrible weapon challenge, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have a setup that you would like me to try next, let me know down below in the comment section, and also make sure to thumbs up the ones you would also like me to try. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.